Ignas Uogintas. He's a partner in the Lithuanian Architecture Bureau with Architects, and his lecture will be dedicated to some of the projects that connected to working with a different context, in the project that you have been done in your office. Welcome, Ignas.
So hi everybody. First of all, I'll say that actually if you have any questions or maybe something is unclear or you didn't understood, always just ask, say. We could have it more as a dialogue, not as a kind of official lecture. I would like it to have more as a dialogue, because for me it's also very interesting how things work here in Ukraine, in Kharkiv. What kind of similarities do we have or differences? So I'll show a couple of the projects of my office. But if you, for example, see some references or have some comments or want to ask about something, please do, and we could just talk about that, because we have the evening for ourselves, and let's enjoy. So actually, the office Do Architects is the office of thinkers, architects, dreamers, and creators. And we have written this motto for ourselves, that actually it's that together we achieve lasting transformation and significant built environments. And we try to always create architecture that attracts attention, makes influences, and determines success. Now in our office there is more than 30 people, 34 or 35 people working there. So it's quite a big company for Lithuanian scales. And I personally actually joined the team. I was invited to become a partner in 2015. And now actually my focus is more on architecture theory, on creative processes, learning processes. I started teaching in Vilnius Technical University, teaching architecture, and also I have already been invited and been a teacher in 3 workshops in 3 different countries already this year. So it's quite a new field for me, teaching others about architecture, but I find it very interesting, inspiring, and you can have so many new things, learn new stuff, rediscover some stuff, sometimes understand how easy it is sometimes to make and how complicated it is to explain for the people who have totally different point of view, or it also helps you to open up your minds and maybe try to see some things from other perspectives. So and our office is, as I said, quite big, 35 people. We're quite horizontal. Of course, there are project leaders, there are partners, there are architects, assistants, but we work, as you saw previously, like in this image, this is our working space. Our offices, I'll talk about that a bit later, is subdivided in a couple of areas, but our office space is one big area, so everybody knows what all of the rest of people are doing at the same moment. It's quite noisy sometimes, but it helps always to feel this rhythm of the office. To maybe if you hear somebody's discussing some interesting topic and you have something to say, you can add to that. Or maybe you hear something that you didn't know before, maybe some law, maybe there's some new law that just have changed. Or
you can use headphones.
Or of course you could use headphones just to concentrate on work individually. Also there are some smaller rooms where you can just go and work individually in total silence. And it's quite a big office. There is quite many of us, and actually the office is quite young as an architect office, but we have already done and have been doing quite a lot of projects. Like just recently, a contemporary art museum opened in Vilnius, and we were working together with Tanya and Libeskin Studio on this project to realize it. But today I want to talk about existing situations and transformations of existing situations, because I think more and more these days you don't have this tabula rasa empty sheet where you can just build from scratch. you always have some kind of existing context, whether it's old barn, old farm, some old Soviet building, or some kind of a political context, or there are so many things that you have to adjust. Always you have to be aware of the environment and somehow react to that in your process. So I kind of try to, like yesterday we were discussing what should I talk about, and girls said that I should talk a little bit about the way how we work, and I tried maybe to summarize it into 4 words, that is honesty, authenticity, context, and love. And also you can see here SML-XL, it kind of resembles this, of course, Chrestomatic book by OMA, but also that means that we're working on all of the scales, from big urban development to the interiors, and architecture projects and landscape projects. Because actually the principles, as Jan Gehl said, actually recently, are quite the same to compare urban tissue, urban design, or interior. Still, it's about people, how people walk, move, react to each other, see each other. Because as architects, we're designing for people. So the scale is not an issue for us, but, and we design, it's because there are so many people, not by some kind of rules, but some values, principles of us. And each of the project might be very different, but like there are these 4 values that you have to be honest. Honest meaning that you have to be clear and straight, that you can communicate easily, be understandable, and be someone people can trust. Always try to reply to the emails, talk to the people, say what are the difficulties, what are the issues in the process. Second thing is authenticity. Of course, you know that you have to be yourself, find something interesting yourself, don't be afraid of sometimes something odd, because all of us were different, and that's fine. That's why the office is quite big, and always in all of the projects we try to work in teams, never alone. At least if it's extremely small project, at least 2 people. So you have some area to discuss and debate and kind of compare ideas and try to convince each other for this or that idea. That kind of creates this richness of the project. Of course, context, I think, which is you probably all know about it. It is extremely important to listen to the environment, whether it's historic, political, spatial, not about only the heights of the building or insulation, but also you have to think about what is the cultural, historical situation of the concrete site, economical situation, etc. So context and love. Of course, you have to be true to yourself, and you have to love yourself, and you have to love what you are doing. If you don't like what you are doing, then it's not for you then. Because sometimes, of course, as architects, you might know that sometimes you might stay quite late. Sometimes there is this change that needs to happen. So if you don't like what you're doing, if you kind of don't like the project or the process, it's then really hard to proceed. So so you have to really kind of love what you're doing. And also that means that this love means that you have to wish people well, whether it's your client or whether it's your colleague or whether it's some people that will be using. You have somehow to be optimistic, positive, and wish that, of course, you have to strategize what if some bad situation happens, but always you have to be optimistic in the projects, in the process, in the project. So those 4 basic things kind of, I think, summarizes the project, and this is the office where we are now, based in Vilnius. And there is a very funny story about this office. Like previously, it used to look like this, and our office used to be, well, it had different name, and Andra Baldišiūtė, she had her office, which was called Andra Baldi, and I with, now actually many colleagues from the office were working there, and I was like in 1st or 2nd or 3rd grade. And because it was nearby, and it's quite an already historic center, and this is like this modernistic enclosed building, so we would, in the evenings, would just go there to see actually what's happening inside, because it was totally abandoned, some homeless people were living there. And we were like sometimes in the evening sketching how the street could be designed, how the building itself maybe could be transformed. And somehow it happened that after a while, just some clients came to us and said that actually we have this site, would you like to design it? So it was very interesting kind of a discovery, a rediscovery again, that we actually have already something on that building. But this was already at the time when our office was in the very city center, in the old town next to the castle and cathedral, in the very nice location on the 3rd floor. We just recently kind of did a renovation, and this opportunity occurred. But at the beginning, we didn't think that our office will be here. We just designed this building as apartment building. For different types of people, and the ground floor, because it was created in such a way so the apartments could be used for disabled people, so it's on the ground floor, easily accessible. So it was easy to transform it to the office or some kind of space. And then we thought, why don't we just actually rent it ourselves, and have our own office there instead of just making some retail on the ground floor. So this is how this idea came to actually come to this office. Historically, it was built in '72, I think, as a warehouse for this, because Lithuania, it was Soviet times, for those products that were scarce, like bananas, caviar, alcohol, etc. That would only be affordable, accessible for some kind of, politicians, etc., And then after the independence, some neighbors told that it was ruled by the mafia, so maybe they were storing something in that, or maybe they were like just taking those caviar, I don't know. Then later in the 90s, it was people that were living around knew that actually you could buy really good cosmetics there, coats from somewhere, shuby, and similar stuff. But by time it kind of it got abandoned, and it was like abandoned for 10 years. So so with the design, actually, when we designed it, the idea was, of course, to leave as much as possible to show all of the imperfections. When we were doing the drawings, we noticed actually that the floor is like the building is like 50, 60 meters in width, and in all of that width it's a bit like tilted, so all of the pillars and everything is a bit and margin was quite big actually, but in the design, all of the imperfections, all of these historic layers we decided to keep, to show. It was also because of the economic reasons, because one thing is nice to see actually what is there. As an architect, we always love to see construction, structure, materials, different layers, sound, and how those real materials work or decay or don't decay. But also all of the new things that were added. For example, the walls were painted only the new walls that we add. If there's an existing wall or some surface that is not being touched, like ceiling or some pillars, we just leave it like that. So this was the logic behind the interior of the building, of the ground floor, and of other stores. And the organization of the ground floor is divided in such a way that there is like two parts. You already saw previously the part where we're working. It's like more oriented to the inner garden. And towards the street, we have this the spaces where we have a bar, where you just enter at the bar. So when people enter, we offer the coffee immediately. And then there's space for meetings, different spaces for reading, for relaxing, some even gallery with some models and already projects that we have finished. And we have even a sauna. Here we can see in the first plan a small sauna. Because also some of the tables from our office are being used by our friends, and one of this small office, this friend's office, they're doing things out of wood. So they decided, why don't we try to do this experiment and try to think of new type of tiles, not tiles, sorry, planks out of wood, how it can be kind of connect it and maybe let's do something out of it. So we decided maybe let's do sauna. It's really good acoustics in here. It's really nice for phone calls. It's very calm and close. You can just close there and have a nice conversations. And it's actually being used in the evenings. Sometimes you're going down the street. You can see actually it is a glass wall, so it's really visible from the street, and people, when they are sitting inside, can see the street. So sometimes when you're walking by at weather like that in the evening and you're looking inside, you can see naked people like having a bath. Really nice. It changed the atmosphere of the street because, not because people are gathering there, but previously because the street was really closed, you had only this enclosed facade like that, almost no windows, just one entrance, some bushes, lots of cars parked. And when we did this wall of opening, somehow this inside space, this interior became part of the exterior space. Somehow there were some people, some homeless people that used to sleep somewhere in those bushes next to that building. Now because actually you have to understand the context is quite close to the station area, so it's not like this fancy neighborhood. It's a normal neighborhood with real people living around it. So, and this opening up, it kind of increased the security of the area. Kind of a very interesting phenomenon. You would think that the opposite would happen, maybe somebody would break in, but no, actually the street became visible. And when you are in the street, you have a feeling like somebody is watching you. So now the street is just naturally becoming a bit cleaner. There are not so many garbages on the street because people that are passing by, they don't drop the garbage because they feel that because this huge window, maybe somebody will be watching from the inside. So it kind of creates this awareness of the environment. And I'm saying that because it's really visible. You could read that in some kind of a theory books, but kind of it really works that way, that kind of a street becomes part of your living room. And to the other side, you can see here our tables, our working spaces, and we have this terrace. This is a very interesting adjustment because we have this roof, and because of the roof, we don't need any curtains, because in the office you don't want to have a direct sunlight because it would blind your screen, so you won't see the computer so clearly. And this created two things: created really nice terraces for the apartments above, and created this nice terrace a bit shaded from the heavy sunlight in the summertime. And also you can see the steps, because it has 3 floors plus underground with parking now. So the ground floor is for office, and 2 upper floors are for apartments. So this upper floor is quite small apartments with their personal entrance from the garden. And on the 3rd floor there are a couple of lofts because the space is much bigger. So they have I don't remember the height of the ceiling, but quite high spaces, even small patios inside, and roof terraces. So with already nice views towards the city. So this is the photo of this loft with the patio with a round staircase to the roof terrace on top. So these are the plans, organization. As you can see, there are 2 staircases with lifts from both from both sides that you can enter, or from parking, or just from the garden when you enter to the premises. You can go up to those small apartments. Some of them are connected, so it becomes like bigger living room and 2 bedrooms. And these small ones are really tiny. It's like 30, 35, 40 square meters, but that's perfect for a single guy or girl to live. And actually many guys from office are living there. So it's like also a community. You're living and then you're going down with your halat, almost from the shower to work. Some say maybe it's a little bit too close from the office, so they kind of in the morning take a detour, maybe just take a dog for a walk just to have a little bit of distance from the office. And in the garden we have a second phase because this is our office, you can see here, and this will be a second phase and housing apartment in the garden. And now it's being built, so it's really nice to see actually how everything is evolving, how all the constructors are builders are on the site and doing something or not doing something, always you can, you know, phone the persons responsible and say, why is this brick there or not there? So it's really nice to see all this process in real time, in reality, like really next to you. And this is already the next project. I want to talk about this project a little bit because actually it was my graduation project in Copenhagen, Royal Academy of Arts and Architecture there. And it's really very closely linked to what the students are doing here in the workshop that I'm in. Together with you, it's in this project I try to analyze what are the existing situations of microrayons in Vilnius, in a bit further away from the city center, how they work or don't work, and what could be adjusted as what you are doing, how you can do some adjustments to increase some kind of quality, to repair something. So at first I was analyzing how many microrayons there are in Vilnius, Lithuania, and I found out more than 40% of buildings, like footprint of a built environment, are actually those standard prefabricated mass housing elements. That means that if you find some kind of unlocking formula, how you can transform one, it could be applied to 40% of this mass in Vilnius. And my study of my interest was the Pašilaičiai rayon because of the very odd urban shape. It has those 3 rings with the housing inside, and then 4th one because it was already designed in 86, 88, so it was already like this perestroika moment, and it was transforming into independence. So you can already see the hints of closed gardens inside and perimeters and smaller streets, whether these ones are just, you know, standard with generic green and ring of road around. So for me it was quite interesting to analyze that, because when I was before working in the Netherlands with Max van, maybe I saw on Facebook that some of you know some guys like Jason or Hiroki. So we were working together on so many different urban and architectural projects all around the world. And actually some microrayons that I found in Vilnius were quite unusual forms and shapes that you couldn't see nowhere else. So I had this fascination of how does it work, why it was built, and what could be done in that to increase the qualities in the future. Of course, I did a small analysis to compare actually how it looks. Before moving to Copenhagen to do this work, I was living and working in Netherlands, and at that time Boimere was, was very fashionable to do some projects in Boimere, and these architects from Amsterdam and NL architects, they even won the Mies van der Rohe award on project in Boimere territory in Amsterdam. It was a huge mass housing area which was designed in 60s, and there were many crises, and basically in 2000s, 90s, those big buildings, they were being demolished and transformed into something way much more simple. So for me it was interesting to analyze whether this microrayon Pašilaičiai would become something similar in the future, like a big ghetto of maybe immigrants or some criminals, like it happened in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, in this Boimere territory. But actually what was interesting to compare it with the city center, even though the density is smaller than the city center, but the people that are living there are quite similar in income status, in family status, education, kind of almost the same nationality is also like quite mixed. Okay, you can see here more Lithuanians than in city center, but still it's not like really monogeneous. There is a mix of people and age categories. So it's kind of there are a mixed group of people living in those microrayons, which is interesting. But of course there is this tendency that richer people are moving to the city center or to the outskirts because they can buy their own house, or they can buy an apartment in the very city center. Plus, there are so many people that are going abroad to study, to work, and some of them are not coming back. So you have this tendency that those old microrayons are becoming like older generation dominates in those areas, or people with lower income. To this point now, it's still not a problem, but if this tendency continues in the future, it might become like a ghetto, or because those territories are quite far away from the city center, from each other. So not to have those problems in the future, what to do now? And I tried to point out a couple of problems that they have. So of course, probably all of you know that all of those open space micro areas have the lack of public space, this intermediate space. It's just generic green, which is not yours, nor it is being prepared by the government. Because if that would belong like to some kind of a group community, they would take care of it. But because it's kind of not theirs, even the first floor is a bit detached, it's a bit higher, 1 meter higher from the ground floor. So all of the field around the building is not really depends for the people. So and plus there are so many people, so they don't really take care of it. Plus, because there are so many land, the government also don't manage to clean all of the space, so all of the places. So it kind of makes this already problem at the very beginning. Then those neighborhoods have lack of employment facilities. What that means that there is only 2 kindergartens and I think 1 shop in this area. When to compare to the city center, of course, you have huge variety of mix of offices, apartments, different spaces, different configurations, and this mix of possibilities. What is also very interesting, the city center of Vilnius is protected UNESCO heritage, and etc. And in a way, it's really complicated to do something in there because you have to have so many agreements. The real estate is so expensive, but it's changing so rapidly, and you can see so many new restaurants appearing not every day, but at least every month for sure. And those micro areas, when you're going there, it's like you're going back in time. So it's very odd phenomena because they were designed from these prefabricated elements, and it would seems like you would have some kind of a domino cars which you could maybe modify in the future. But I'll talk about that a bit later. So yeah, lack of functions. Of course, parking is a problem nowadays, but because when it was planned, the amount of parkings was just too little. It was planned I'm afraid to lie, but I think 0.75 cars per apartment. And nowadays, of course, each apartment has at least 1.2 cars, because parents, father and wife has a car, or maybe one of the child already has a car. So many cars in all of these areas around housing, and then apartment layout. Usually, for example, in this area, there is only one type, 120V type apartment, and it has majority of the apartments are exactly the same. So there is no this variation of possibilities to pick what you would like to, where you would like to live. Plus, the rooms are really divided, and it's very hard to connect the rooms like kitchen and living space because of the construction. So it's also small rooms which are subdivided inside. And now actually what the government is doing, there is a strategy to insulate all of the housing, change piping. So it's kind of a national strategy. So majority of those houses now actually are being insulated, but it's only very small aesthetical, not kind of aesthetical, but it's just, just a makeup for face to make extra insulation on top, but not to think about those problematic issues that are actually at the core of those neighborhoods. Yeah, so for example, like this. And majority, as I said, apartments are in 1 or 2 types of apartments. So there is no diversity so people wouldn't have a possibility to choose where to live in bigger or smaller apartment. And these are more or less the wishes. I was talking with the city architect and some other experts. I kind of came out to the 6 criteria that should be a driving force for the project. So of course the quality, because when it was being constructed in 80s, 90s, the quality wasn't that high. For example, concrete or some windows, or I mean the quality of materials was quite poor, but in that sense, I mean, not only the materials, but spatial quality should be increased. Then we need to add variation of program, that it's not only one type of apartment, but we have maybe apartments, offices on the ground floor, something on the roof, so kind of a variations of, so people could choose and create their own living spaces to their liking. Public space, of course, is an issue, how you can transform these parking spaces and have some nice parks so people could play and feel safe and be visible. And kind of a controlled environment, because now when it's open plan, anybody can just cross. So how to make those neighborhoods a bit safer and kind of be a little bit enclosed, so you would have this public spaces like on streets, and you would have semi-public spaces in the courtyards, almost public, almost private spaces in your maybe a staircase on some smaller place, and your own private balcony or some. So we would have this gradation of spaces, like from really open to the close. And of course, as I said, the types of apartments. And this project was interesting because you can see, I'm using this image and some hints of already from the windows, that you can see that these same housing blocks, actually Lithuanians by nature are farmers. And we like, as farmers, to do everything by ourselves. We like to build our own house, we make our own food to eat, and also this painting was painted by the self-learned artist. So this kind of shows the way that actually like this real Lithuanian likes to do things, likes to actually be personal, be his own, create his own. And with those mass housing areas, you can see that balconies is the way where they can express themselves. So each of the balconies are quite different, because of course some want to extend just their living space, others just for security reasons, some people don't care and leave what they have, but it's kind of you have already this small mix. So my idea was actually how you can enhance that and have this, instead of this standard mass housing, and of course you all know this movie after Posle Bani, when the guy from Moscow went to St. Petersburg and the same apartment was there. So how could you avoid that situation with architecture, that actually if he would go to a different place, he would immediately understand that it's not the same. So study site was one of the apartment blocks somewhere, and there were different strategies. I now won't go into depth, but what I want to show, because of the students and this project, that how we went to adjustments of the building in this project. Together with constructors that helped to work on this project, we discovered actually that probably the strongest part of the structure is the connections, because when you connect, you also are adding some metal structure, wiring. So if you try to take out some elements, especially if not from the top, but from the middle, the whole system might just collapse. So you can't really touch the structure because it's like house of cards. And another thing is when, for example, this is interpretation of Le Corbusier domino house, his graduation project, where he proposed slabs and pillars, and that you could have open plan inside. That meant that if the building would change its function in the future, you could adjust. At the beginning, it could be a house, and then it could become an office, because you just have, reconfigure the walls, and the slabs and walls are not a separate thing. But with this, with the structure, you don't have this possibility of freedom. It's really fixed. The room organization is fixed. So how do you have this diversity? And another thing, like in Western cities, in those big cities like in Amsterdam, by Mera, as I mentioned, it's quite easy for the government and huge developers, let's say, to demolish some of the buildings like that, because the majority of the apartments are being rented, are not sold. And in Lithuania, in this case, all of the apartments are private. So as a big developer, if you want to redevelop those sites, you have to buy all of the apartments from the people, demolish it, and then build something new. Super expensive, really not affordable to this day. So how can you transform it with what you have? And so if you can't do it big steps, maybe you can do some small adjustments, maybe just cut out some small parts of this card, of this one of the concrete element, or maybe take something from the top, build next to it, or maybe just put next to the wall. Of course, you can add secondary structure, secondary light metal structure, or maybe put a light structure on top. Because actually it was designed to be from 5 to 9 stories tall, so it should hold quite heavy weights, this house, this structure. Or even hang something extremely light on the facades. So we kind of, based on those 8 principles, I came up with the toolbox of how you could attack the ground floor, the entrance, because one of the issues is how you enter. As I mentioned before, there is like the steps going up. Usually they have elevators, but to get to elevators, you have to go to 12 steps. So for disabled people, it's impossible to go to the elevator, which is funny. Then there is this garbage bins in front of the entrance. So it's always smelly. There is no place for the bikes to keep, and you don't want to be there because it's smelly. There is no bench to sit and see your neighbors. So one of the things is, of course, how do you enter to the building? How you can clean up the space, maybe make a bigger foyer and put those garbages underground. You have more space underground and have a nicer premises. Or maybe you could just add additional, like kind of a box, like a container. It could be just the roof for you to have the bikes and maybe posts to put in, or even enclosed space. So it could be kind of so you enter, you have some space where you could already get a bit warmer, and you could just protect yourself from the wind. Then the ground floor. Already there are some on the ground floors, even here I think, hairdresser stores or some small offices, but how to enhance it. So maybe you can add some extra entrances, bigger terraces there. Maybe you can add some ramps so disabled people could actually enter the lifts in the middle, or if necessary, sometimes it's possible to transform ground floor with extra construction, with extra structure for some kind of a community space, because the staircases and the halls are quite narrow. There is no place for people to gather and be, and there are quite a lot of neighbors, and you don't see your neighbor, you don't get to know your neighbor, and therefore you're not feeling safe in your staircase when you don't know who's living like next to you. So it's very connected actually. To feel safe, you have to know your environment, you have to know your neighbors. So for example, as one of the toolbox, maybe it's to add some kind of a community space for them to gather, maybe to watch a movie or play ping pong or something like that. Then there are adjustments on the top. You will see in the images later that, or I showed before, it's like terraced, but those roof terraces are not being used. So very simple thing, you could just make some openings and already have a terrace, or do something more, maybe community this space on the top floor, or even some kind of steps, so it would become an extra apartment or office space or penthouse on top with the beautiful views. And of course the ground floor, how you can clean up the streets, how you can add this ground floor for example, the apartments on the ground floor, that they would have their own, a little bit of soil that they could take care of. So it would be much cleaner. And from this catalog of toolboxes, there were more, but those were the main ones. There was a pilot project just to show how it could look. So one of the aspects was the ground floor, how you can reconnect the building with the surroundings. And another thing is that you have parking from one side, but this garden is to the other side. So from the balcony you can see the garden, but you can never enter. You always have to go around the building, and usually it's not only the big building, but the big structure. So if you want to go to your garden, which you are seeing, you have to go like 10 minutes around the block to get there. So how can you easily access it? So like if you're entering the staircase, this was one idea, just you get rid of one room from one apartment on the ground floor and have this connection to the park, which is to the south, and you can even have a ramp to get to the lift. Then another thing is, instead of just insulating the facade, you could extend it, have extra balconies, and those balconies would become some kind of extra living space, maybe some kind of a dynamic space, maybe somebody wants more and somebody less. Plus, it creates this double facade system that in the summertime you can open it up and ventilate. In the summertime you can close it, and it works like a heater, because during the wintertime, if sun is shining, it kind of heats up the space. It's like it could work like thermos some way. And of course, on the ground floor, maybe some of the functions go down, so actually to touch the garden. And on the roof, because it was sloping, the idea was somehow maybe to have extra facilities on top, and maybe even to create extra staircase, and also for fire escape reasons, but also to have nice apartments or even office spaces on top with beautiful views towards the park. So this was kind of the way how you could just find some difficulties, issues, and just tackle them and try to solve it in kind of creative, funny ways. This was my academic project, but maybe in the future it will evolve into something, maybe with some of you, I don't know. I'm just showing it just to share it, and because I don't like what is happening, just insulating those old micro-rayons. I think something more should be done, might be done, and if it's possible somehow to kind of find a way how we could find this code, how we could reconfigure it without demolishing and building something new, that could be really game-changing for majority of the cities. Because as I said, for example, only in Vilnius there is 40% of buildings like that, so it's quite a big mess. Talking about urban design, this is Ogmios territory. This is area that we have been working on for the last 10 years, the architects as an office. I've written something down. And what is interesting that when there was the first strikes and the first meetings for independence in 88, 89, next to Lithuanian parliament, next to TV tower, all of the tanks were going actually from this side because it was a military base. And with all of the warehouses, repair shops, but this kind of was Šiaurės miestelis. It was mainly concrete warehouses for different factories, but also military uses. And now it's very funny to see how it actually transformed from this negative aura to a place where people would come on the weekend just to hang out, spend time in there. For example, one of the streets. And I have small text that I want to read because it's quite poetic, and that's you might think that only an old town has its identity creative process happen in theaters and museums, and beautiful living is only possible in your own home. But when you put your own creative ambition into a drawer and start observing people, you start to see that by not building, not demolishing, adopting, adjusting, rescaling, resizing, you can find a change in the environment. Maybe I'll just show this one. And actually, when before there were no place for two cars to cross each other, now you can find a place for trees to grow, a car to park, a fountain to sprinkle, a bench to sit, a building to glue, or even a human being to be. And actually, this area is a new shopping district, but it's dynamic, it's organic, it has parks, plazas, squares, different functions, and various streets. And priority is for people walking. Transformations of buildings are happening by keeping existing and adjusting new. And what that means that the story was that before the crisis, the developers of that area, because it belongs to some group of developers, decided somehow to make something new, to make some kind of a new area, new district there. And there were international workshops. Many international companies were proposing different schemes, how to develop, whether with high-rise offices or huge shopping malls, but it was the year of the crisis. So the crisis came, and actually the whole development stopped, but it was a game changer for the whole area. Because the developers realized that instead of demolishing everything and building from scratch, you somehow have to adjust. And at the beginning, they were using existing warehouses for local markets and stuff. And by time it just grew naturally, and now it's already transforming for the last 3 years, but the process of designing was happening for the last 10 years. And it's really nice how actually developer sees that it's really important to 10 times draw. We say it's 9 times measure and just a 10th time cut. So it's, with this area, it's like there are so many adjustments, so many different projects being done, so many proposals, and it's really those lots of subtle changes that increases the quality. And it's like we're doing this master plan of the whole area, but also realization of some buildings in the area, new ones. So you kind of have every day, like every week, there is these conceptual meetings about the overall process and progress of the territory, but at the same time there are different meetings about exactly construction sites, how the exact detail has to be detailed and what has to be delivered where. So it's kind of a very continuous process, very intuitive process. And what is interesting that in a way somehow resembles the old town, because in the old town, if there's one construction of, let's say one building, and you just close the facade, but the street is still a living street. There are still many other shops in the street, and still people are passing by, and you just don't notice if there is a construction site. So it's something like that happening here. Some buildings are modifying, changing. We always try to keep the existing, not to demolish, but somehow to adjust, to reskin. Even, for example, in this building, when it was being renovated, and instead of just basement, there was a ground floor added, all of the floors above were working because they were renting as a working places, and during all of the construction site, the guys were running it, their offices. And to this day, maybe it will continue this project upcoming 10 or 15 years, who knows, but already now you can see the change. And for us, as I said, it was really important public space design, spaces for people, parks, terraces. The clients really appreciate that. They really want to keep every tree that is possible in the site. They want to add as much trees as possible. So even a parking, if previously there was a habit that you would have a huge parking in front of the entrance to some kind of a shop, in this project the parking was designed further away, so you have to leave your car and then walk. And this walking created possibilities for smaller, like pavilions, cafeterias, because especially on the weekends, it's really nice to come with your children, to leave the car a bit further away, and to go to have some shopping, but at the same time to stay here. And it's not only shops that are there. There are now kindergarten, there is a TV station, there are some places that are being rented for smaller or bigger offices. The only thing that is not in the area is housings. But all of the rest of the functions are already or are being planned to be in the future in the area. For example, in the studio with one student we have talked, she introduced the idea of connection, of like open up and seeing different processes of the postal office, that you can see also and the warehouse and the technical facilities. And we had a similar idea in this pavilion, that inside there is 4 different renters, different cafeterias, different restaurants, but the walls between them, they have to be of glass, so you always see the presence of people. Because actually in streets, in cities, there is, I think, one major rule, that people attract people, and people gather people. So if you think about people, you think how to create people, you think how to make nicer spaces for people, and if there will be somebody sitting next to the table, next to the window in cafeteria, this couple or these people that will be sitting there will attract more people to come to this cafeteria. It's kind of a common rule for cafeterias, but actually it's very common for people. Like you like to hang out in the spaces where you can see many people, and you don't like spaces where it's empty, cold, and nobody's around. So how you can create spaces where you have this feeling and where you can gather many people to one space. And for example, this was the fountain that was in the area, and when it started working, people just started playing. There was even in one news agency, there was a post online with some naked girls showering the next day. So they did some kind of a flash mob there. Of course, you have to put extra attention to the landscape, to small elements like benches that would only be for sitting, but maybe for just laying down and enjoying sunshine. And also, it's not about, many of the solutions are very simple. For example, in this facade, you can see the cut brick, but it's just lifted like this and cut, and you can see those holes in the middle. And instead of gluing the brick to this side, you're just having to the other sides. And you can see these vertical stripes when you have a cut because of the type of the brick. I think you also have those bricks with holes. So with that, it's kind of you can just make a nice, really beautiful graphics, some kind of a new pattern out of that. Another project. If I'm too fast or too slow or something, just let me know, stop me, and we could just discuss, debate. Another project was lifeguard station next by the sea, next to Coronian Lagoon, in this small peninsula next by the Baltic Sea. It was built in 70s as a lifeguard station, and it was again abandoned for so many years. There is an image before and after, closed and abandoned. And we did a design to propose to kind of restore it as a lifeguard station, but also to introduce some functions. So it has some kind of a cafeteria, so it attracts attention, attracts people. So it's not only aesthetical thing, but also functional thing. You would want to come there because you would just have a warm tea if it's very windy, or have a beer if it's cold beers if it's very hot. Plus, extra thing was this huge terrace. And in the summer times, it's nice to have some events, and these steps could be transformed into kind of a stage. Yeah, this is from the lifeguards room, just a clean facade. And afterwards, when it was finished, the local surfers use it for different for different events, and it was one of the first events where professionals teach amateurs how to surf, and there was some bands playing on the steps, and so this building created some kind of an atmosphere in the area. It wasn't just a small renovation of what needed to be, because actually originally what had to be done just a renovation of the building so the lifeguard could be there, but we really wanted to bring extra things like this cafeteria or these steps to have the possibility to functionally just use it in different ways. Another project of ours where we try to play with the existing context, maybe also have that. This is the white one is the kindergarten. We have a couple of types of kindergarten made in Soviet times. There are not so many of them. And one of the types is this one. This kindergarten asked for extension to have some extra classes. But we wanted to have a challenge with that, just not to add some extra classes outside, but somehow to clean up and to increase the quality of this kindergarten itself. Because when we were studying the existing floor plan, we found out that this is how it looks. Actually, teachers themselves are like putting all of those things, and parents of the kids are helping, and they are maintaining it well. So the landscape looks really well maintained, but they don't have enough space. And as I was saying, that there are so many corridors inside those kindergartens and there is no space for people to gather. There is no sport hall. Also, there is no this activity hall where they would have some kind of meetings, gatherings like Christmas, the 1st of September, and so on. Or they have to do it outside or in their classrooms. So we wanted with our design somehow propose to extend some corridors into bigger space, so it would become something more, just a corridor. Then it would become like this one, like amphitheater, which you could use summertime and wintertime. Instead of corridors, you would have wider spaces with hangars, changing rooms, so even kids, if they don't want to stay inside in the class, they could use this space for running, playing, being there. And also we wanted to create enclosed space because as I was said previously with the housing projects, also with the kindergartens, sure you have the fence around, but the public space around the building is really open. So how to create this intimate space where teachers would be calm and would know that people would play safely without any risks of being. You never know what might happen, or might be even taken. For example, when I was living in the Netherlands, there were stories that some kids were kidnapped from kindergartens there, so it was like horrible stories. In Lithuania, we don't have those stories yet, but you never know. So spaces you create, like this inside patio, maybe with this bigger corridor, which could transform into a bigger hall for events, and corridors, which could be like playing spaces for kids, classrooms with glass to the floor, so the kid actually, another big thing is that all of the windows in all of those classrooms are 1.10 meters, it's above the radiator, and the kid, he's really small, he doesn't see through the window, he doesn't see what's happening outside, just the sky. And when you're designing a kindergarten, of course, you have to think about the kid. Maybe that he, instead of standing next to the window, that he can actually see the grass, see this beetle going on the grass, walking there, and you touch the real materials. We wanted to make it out of wood, and our intention, our ambition was to make everything out of wood. Constructions out of wood, all of the surfaces out of natural wood, not some kind of a laminated things. And now we're in the process of having all of those agreements, and most probably, we'll have everything out of wood. So this is because now it's still being developed, and this is the classroom because it's quite deep. It's really important to have this, as I said, connection to this outside, so every class has a nice outside terrace plus lots of sunlight. So the desk, the working area is always lit, and this playground area is always lit. If talking about transformations, this is another project. It's quite old project of ours, but this is the project that we got in Lithuania. Every 2 years there is a competition for the best project, and it got an award for one of the 5 best projects in Lithuania at that time, and also it was nominated for Miss Van der Rohe, and it's just a container city. It's actually, even to this day now we're working on this master plan, but before, when I was at the beginning of today's lecture, I was saying that we had this other office, Andrea Balde, and Andrea, partner of 2 architects, when she was studying in the Netherlands, she was working with Karas and Brand's landscape office on this master plan, and when she came back to Lithuania, she just continued to work on it. So it was, and still is, one of the first projects of ours. And of course, the story is connected to the crisis of 2008. There were plans to build at least some parts of it. These are the Koronian Lagoon, More Baltiskoe, how it is in Russian. In Lithuanian is Kuršių marios. In Russian is maybe Kuršiai More. And canals go inside. So with the boat, you could go almost to any house inside. It's like a bit like Dutch influence. But of course, because of the crisis and huge scales, the process was very slow. But what is interesting for that site, what is really what is really there, the water is very shallow. It's only 40 centimeters depth in many places, so it's perfect spot for learning to windsurf. And also it's very windy, so it's really a perfect spot for windsurfers. And before there were any containers, just people, enthusiasts would come there with cars, with tents. During the bad weather, during stormy weather, wife with kid would sit in the back, and husband would just change and go to surf, and the wife would just read a book with the engine on because it's cold and rainy inside. It was some kind of a culture of that, and we thought that with putting those containers, it could be like a first step to show the potential of this territory, to invite more people there, and also to have a just better infrastructure for those people who like to surf. So it's like a sit out of containers with cafeteria, nice restaurant, showers, living spaces, sleeping units. It's very simple, very cheap. The furniture is from IKEA, and interior is nothing special, because of course the most important thing is the surfing itself. Nice food in a restaurant, so just feeling cozy and warm. It's not about some aesthetical things, it's about really that you feel happy doing that. So it was the first project in there, and because of the evolution of the project, of many parts of it, and before of the lecture I was saying that there's 4 things that are driving us, and it's as I said, honesty, authenticity, context, and love. This project is driven by love. At the very beginning, when there was a master plan of the territory being developed, you wanted to show somehow different areas and different symbols, different schemes, because if you would show them just in some kind of a mass, you would understand that it will be maybe the same house. So we wanted to show them that maybe architects who will design those buildings have to be different, and aesthetically how they look, they have to be different. So we chose different shapes to show that. And it so happened that one of those was just a round shape in model. And when there was a presentation to the client, kind of saw it and said, oh, nice, very interesting building. Maybe I would like to live in it. Maybe something interesting would become out of this model. And then we thought ourselves, oh, why not? Maybe it's something really, because we started playing with the floor plans of it, and it kind of has a logics. On the ground floor, we have entrance under the roof and the place where you can keep your kite or equipment after the surfing time, and then you can go up the stairs to the upper floor, which is a living space with a beautiful view because you're a bit higher, so you can see towards the lagoon. And in this attic, in the top floor, you can have your bed, sleeping unit. I'm sorry, I have, I took out this render. And you have like a bed, a sleeping unit also with a beautiful view, but more intimate, more close. So this design was not driven, because mainly, of course, we focus firstly function, logics, economy of the project, but this project was driven by love, by shape, by form. And at the beginning, when we just were working on plans, we did some renders, and we just released it on our website, and it was very quickly somehow seen and taken by different media around the world. And we even got phone calls from China or India. Maybe you could sell us the plans, and we could copy it and build somewhere in China. So it showed the interest that people were really into it, into this project as a form. So that's about it, I think, about projects, about remaking. Maybe now, what's next? Maybe now let's have this open discussion, more open talk about architecture, buildings, landscape.
I noticed that you like to apply greenery in your projects, outdoors, but why not to add more plants in your office? You have very interesting bright windows, lots of light, and I think that greenery would be
Yeah, sure.
There is no greenery in your office.
It will grow. It's just the photos are new, and on the street, we were working with this local landscape designer. She has her own garden, and she experiments a lot with local species of plants, with local ivies, how they can survive harsh winters, or next to the street you have this acid and all of this from the tires and when they are cleaning the streets. So what kind of plants could grow there? So on the street side. This year, she together with us planted some plants, and they should
Inside your office.
Inside.
It would be very beautiful for people. It will create atmosphere, pleasant atmosphere among the employees.
Sure, of course. If we'll find something, of course. The office, as I said, it was, because it's quite a big space, it was driven, of course, by economy. Just you have to be there and you have to create what is really necessary, just walls, floor, tables to sit. You have to have Wi-Fi, toilet, and you can work. Just printers and server, and then you can work. And all of the rest, just, I think, as with time, will add. Like you saw this lamp that we had afterwards. Somebody really liked it and decided to buy. Then some other people are maybe bringing some odd models that you can keep outside or inside. Some plans, somebody's actually, there was every summer, every now and then, we're having these events in the office where we try to, or go somewhere as an excursion, or just for ourselves, for have internal talks. And the last time, we gave a present to ourselves, a big tree that we just planted in the garden. So with time, of course, it's very important, our greenery and landscape. Yeah, but with the landscape, with all of the trees, I think what is important and what is also a quality that we have to understand is the time. That for the tree to grow, you need time. And especially if we have some kind of a city context and if we're building some new buildings, it's very easy to cut all of the trees to design a new house or some kind of a urban layout and just plant the new ones where you think it will grow. But it takes, 20, 30, 40 years to tree fully to grow. And then there is a risk not to grow.
But young gardens are very beautiful itself.
Young gardens?
Young gardens.
Without trees?
No, with small trees.
Yeah. No, yeah, aesthetics. I think every person has his or her own aesthetics and have a point on aesthetics. But what I'm saying is, especially for the gardens, you can build plants, everything immediately at one point, but then it might be very expensive to buy those trees that have been grown in some way in the tree nursery, or to bring some odd species. Maybe sometimes it's really important to look what is happening already on the site, on the context, and maybe somehow you can use some ivy, some old local tree or something. This is very big.
Regarding this particular project, I want to ask, are you sort of idea of, I don't know, some transformation, evolution from car society to other phase of development, social development, or you just provoke? It's mostly, some kind of provocation or I don't know, implementation. Your office, your philosophy, your idea, or it is a tendency.
No, it's actually a tendency. This is maybe one of the first birds. I think the first, because around in the context you can see only concrete, asphalt, and these warehouses. There is no public space for the people to be, and there are actually the people are living around it, but they used to just go to the city center, not to be there. And now people are like coming back and staying there, and people from other places are coming there to be, not to buy something, but just maybe to go to the playground. But it's becoming a tendency. Like if to talk about supermarkets, other supermarkets that are indoor are really following that. and they are actually seeing the good examples that it's really connecting. The good quality of public space increases the price of the real estate, that actually then developers can ask more for to rent a space, and but the ones who are renting it are willingly doing so because they have more people that are coming here. So aesthetically it's increasing. You have cars that are further away, you have restaurants and cafeterias and shops that are higher in value, and the developer is happy. So kind of this aesthetical value and the right principles really kind of helps the whole engine to work. And actually, it's if you look at that, it's how city centers, historical city centers used to be. You would have everything on the street, and the street would be for people. So we would have all of the entrances to the ground floor, all of the premises, those sometimes gardens. Especially in Vilnius. I haven't been yet to Kharkiv's city center, but in Vilnius it's very archaic. It's actually very old urban tissue. But of course, during wars, centuries, there are so many different periods, so many different areas. But somehow this public space realm is a little bit forgotten. So maybe with this project, it kind of again revitalizes the idea that the street, the public space, is our city's living room. It's where we spend actually quite a lot of time. Some of us maybe even majority of the time. So if we're thinking how we design where we live, and actually we live in the street in our city, so we should really think about how we design our streets, whether it's for cars, how wide is it, or whether it should be for people, where we can plant trees. Trees also have this nice micro climate. They have a shade in the summertime. In the wintertime, you have more sunlight because no leaves. It's a bit more humidity because, of course, of the tree breathes. So,
but the climate in Lithuania is very humidity on a high level.
Not like in tropics. No, it's like here. It's exactly like here. When I landed, I thought I landed in Vilnius because it's same amount of snow, windy, rainy.
I'm influence of Baltic.
Okay, of course there is a region just next by the sea, and there is like I think 100-kilometer radius around the sea, which is more mild. But like Vilnius is already in this more. It's not still continental. It's a bit more mild than here in Kharkiv. But because we're a bit more north, I don't know how many thousand kilometers. I don't know how many kilometers. So it's quite similar.
I noticed you apply layering in your landscape projects. It is, different levels of ground around buildings, and impregnate this space with game plants.
You saw it somewhere in some photo?
Yes.
Just stop me when.
Military base, former Soviet military base. So I noticed that on the former Soviet. Oh, well, yes, this.
This one?
No, previous. Oh, this one.
Well, this is just natural landscape. Just this area is a bit lower.
You break the total view on different areas, and I think it looks more interesting.
Thank you. The logic behind was that this building was not using the ground floor. It was like 1 meter, like just, small windows in the basement. And with just cutting around it, you create a floor with the ground floor, with shops or entrances to the amenities. And then you have a lower area, some kind of plaza. And around it, you could have steps, stairs, benches to sit. There is a very interesting movie. It's called Social Life of Urban Spaces, if I'm correct. It's about public space in New York, and it's done in 64, 65, and it's like a science movie, how the public space should be used. What is really important for the cross sections, because as you know, New York was, when they were building those skyscrapers for developers, the city was asking that the higher you build, the better public space you have to create on the ground floor. So in this movie, you can see what kind of solutions they provide, and there's also analysis. For example, the crossings of the street are really important because you see many people are crossing by, so you have this interaction. You really want to sit on the bench next to the crossing because you want to watch people, and when the people are crossing by, also maybe want to sit next to you. So there is this interaction. Or also, if there is a park, it has to be or lower or higher. So if it's lower, you can see from a little bit above. It's like like a valley. Like in Siena, there is this very famous square which is like going down. So it's kind of creates this enclosed atmosphere, which is really nice to be. Or it's nice to be lifted a little bit. So when you're sitting, you're at the same height as people walking. So again, you can have this interaction eye to eye. So
but
this
somebody likes insulation.
Insulation?
For people.
Yeah.
For remote.
Yeah. Then you go behind those bushes. No, or you? Yeah.
And I see you use very simple plants, not very exotic.
Because of the climate, because it's quite similar to Kharkiv. So those plants, they have to really survive minus 30.
These plants are very familiar to me, as I see.
Yeah.
In your last project, did you create every parcel of this building on your last project? Or just these two types that you because on your model was very interesting.
Let's go on
slide one.
in this one, yeah?
Or you just want to show that this space would be different?
The second option. During the Soviet times, this area used to be farms. It was like duck farms and also something else. When the master plan was being done, of course, you have to think about the whole city because actually it's quite a big area with the center, with the marina and some public buildings with higher density in one area and smaller in another, maybe by the street again, some taller buildings. So how you can have this, as I said before, variation, diversity of different spaces, different buildings, different types of living. So this is a scheme. This is just a model to know for the developers to strategize actually how to proceed with it, what to do, what not to do. Because at the very beginning, you have the big territory, so you have somehow, to make the master plan of it. So this is the master plan and visualization of the master plan in model. And like those buildings, it's just a principle that they have somehow, what it shows exactly that islands have to be somehow united, but the islands have to be different from each other. So you know that you're in this or that island. And the architecture within the island might be slightly have some kind of the same principles. So, for example, those round shape here are colored inside in different colors. That means that, of course, there will be some changes. Maybe there will be maybe different architects with their own approaches, but main principles should stay. And it's not about shape, actually, it's more about density, intensity, type of units that there will be, whether it's a house with 2 or 4 rooms, or whether it's like an apartment house with a staircase in the middle, or whether it's a house with entrances, separate entrances from the outside. So it's just showing those principles. There was a huge, actually, document of how it should be designed and what should be where, but with leaving this freedom for further stages for architects, the developers in the future to just, decide what it should be.
Most of the project that you showed to us, we were talking about the existing buildings and thinking of
Yeah.
situation, existing context. So how do you work with people who already live there and who use these spaces and buildings? Like
Actually,
local communities, like
yeah.
this project, or with that kindergarten, or in this case, with the people who live around this plot.
Yeah. No, but you always are working with the people. Actually, all of those projects are on private lands, and you're working with the people who own those lands. Of course, different stories with this my academic project, but this is just a study, a survey. Maybe in the future I'll find some nice community, and they would be willing to invest their time and their efforts together with me to go a bit further into that, and maybe we'll think of something how we can transform existing Soviet housing. Maybe in the future the prices will go low so much that it will be possible with some developers to think about strategies how you can transform it. But talking about local communities, this is now a debate about, especially about public space designs. We have national squares and plazas, some smaller plazas in the city center, which needs a new design, and the municipality together with some companies are redesigning it, and local people that are living around have they say what they want to have there, whether they want to have a playground or whether they want to have some elements kept left. And now in Lithuania we're learning actually how to maintain this process of working together with the communities, with developers, with politicians and architects, because I think those branches are extremely important, and without this communication you won't have a good result, because actually the result is if you have those four circles. One is, let's say, a developer who has, let's say, the money and the site. Other circle might be government, or maybe even this community, or usually government should represent some kind of a community because they are being selected by the community, but it might be two circles, that the government which checks that everything is according to law, and the community which is saying what they want and what they need and what is the context, social context, historical context of the site, and that there is designer. So all of those have their own interest in this process, and I think the good result is in the middle of that you hear what every of the different actor in this process are saying, and that you can communicate clearly with each other. Architect somehow has to visualize those words that developer wants, that people want to see into something solid. It's really hard maybe because sometimes, actually quite often, it doesn't correlate. Maybe developer might want to have high density territory. Neighbors want to have a park there. Government doesn't know, or I don't know. and maybe community is very, aggressive because they are afraid they always want to keep the things as they are, whether to, go into unknown, into something to have a change. So
nothing good may happen.
Huh?
Nothing good may happen. The community may think about bad things.
No, but it has to happen. I think you always have to, when you are designing, you have to be open. I think with all of our projects, we really try to, when it's possible, to show up. That's why how our office is organized has this open facade, so actually people can see how we work inside, and we try always to show our projects to the public, so there could be a debate. And after the debate, we always, it's never like you design something and you give it away and then you go, okay, let's build it. It's always a process with so many changes. Designing is just a very small part of it, and then there is so many adjustments, changings, listening to what works, what doesn't work, checking something. It's always like a dynamic process. And I think even the building, when it's being built, it's like a living organism. And as an architect, you are just, creating this baby, making it to life. this baby is like burning, you're creating a birth of the baby, but then afterwards it grows to some kind of a person, and maybe you don't know what kind of a person it will grow, but it has to live its own life and change, adjust. So yeah. I forgot what was the question.
In your study project, like amount of car parks, parking lots.
Yeah.
So basically, what I recently met is the quite opposite situation. That in our project in Oslo, government said that you shouldn't provide any car parks, any car lots for parkings, just a few places for guests.
Mm.
And all other car lots will just replace with bicycles.
Mm.
So how is in Vilnius now? Is it something similar in terms of city policy and terms of government?
It is, yes, it is similar. In the city center, it's a restricted amount of cars that might be per unit, and the amounts are quite low. That means that if you're going to the city center, or you have to pay a lot just to have a parking, or to have somewhere a car parked, or maybe just it's better to use some kind of a parking lots a bit further away from the city center.
But
Now,
it's only for city center, and this area is quite like far from, for example, that one that you studied. They keep same rule like.
yeah, this is a big issue actually, because we don't have a. There are fast buses and trams in Vilnius, but for example, we don't have a metro, and for the bikes, Vilnius is quite slopey, so it's quite difficult, especially during this weather, like going up and down the hill is quite complicated, plus bike infrastructure is not developed yet so well, so you could just simply just drive through like in Copenhagen. Yeah, so many people are using cars. Now there are really lots of cars, and plus Vilnius is expanding. Many people are living in suburbia, and if you have your own house 20 kilometers away from the city center, of course you will have 2, even maybe 3 cars, because father, mother, and a daughter or son has a car. And you have these traffic jams because always there is one person in the car. So there is this problem, but Vilnius city center is somehow now being rediscovered, and many people just somehow want now to, especially more wealthy people, instead of living somewhere in the outskirts, the understanding that it's a quality to living inside the city center, to have an apartment there, rather than somehow a big house somewhere 20 kilometers in the woods. Because you have nice restaurants nearby, you have, all of the social atmosphere, cinemas, theaters. You don't need to stay in the traffic jam for an hour or 2. But yeah, there was a presentation of the city architect last year, and he was saying that they did calculations on, for example, introducing metro to Vilnius. And because actually the Vilnius area is as big as Paris metropolitan area, it's very spread out, it's very low density. To have this metro line from city center, from train station to one of those districts a bit further away, metro line, underground metro line, the whole this neighborhood, the whole rayon, not only microrayon, but I don't know how many thousand people would have to use this metro every hour, go back and forth. So it's unrealistic to have a metro in the near future, unless we really start building skyscrapers. But again, so I think the answer is looking for alternative ways. Now in Vilnius there is a very good system of transport. You just can easily take a car. There are so many they're called city bees or spark cars, car sharing, and there are a couple of companies, and they're like everywhere. So you just easily with your app can unlock it, take a car, drive somewhere, leave a car.
Electric car.
Also, both electric cars and just simple diesel or simple cars. You can choose which one is closer or which one you prefer, or which one is cheaper or more expensive. Which helps actually, because some people are using trams. Then there is these fast buses that really also recently they introduced fast buses with extra lanes for only those buses. So actually it is sometimes faster just to take a bus whether to take a taxi or the sharing car, but you can choose or take a bike. I like to bike everywhere because I was biking in Netherlands and in Copenhagen, and now I'm biking in Vilnius. And actually it's increasing. Now new government, new city mayor is building so many bike lanes around the river, in the parks, connecting different areas. It's getting more and more, you have to have this critical mass to use the bike. If it's only, just a couple of streets where you can go by bike and then the rest is just on the pavement like that, it's not comfortable. But when it's more like 50-60% of the area where you go, it's already a bike path, which is like 2 meters 50 or at least 1.25 with just one lane, nice surface. Then it's kind of, it starts turning. Then you start thinking, maybe I should buy a bike instead of expensive car, and think about maybe during winter time, okay, I won't use the bike, I'll buy the tickets to the bus, but like 7-8 months during the summertime, I'll use the bike because it will be simpler for me. So it needs this critical mass, but it's going this direction.
Could you tell me about the context of this district? I mean, on the road view, we could see the district walk, but I didn't get what is going on around. Is it residential area or zoom out of road view? Next slide?
Yeah.
And here.
Like in this one, you can see a little bit. As I said, it's mainly industrial areas. There is a huge shopping mall here to the north. Actually, to the west, this is the north to the side. Some old factories that are now being transformed into warehouses. They sell some building materials there in those premises. This is a huge, like a mall for furniture. These are also some small, different types of shops where you just go by car to buy maybe tires or something. So it's kind of this post-industrial neighborhood. It's and a bit further away to this side there are living units. Also like this Soviet microrayon a bit after this shopping mall.
It's interesting what is going on there, and how did you consider them in your project? I mean, now it looks like this district looks so bright and so attractive. And
it's a render.
What is going on around, in this case?
Yeah. No, it is like that.
All those people will go here, and those districts, all those areas around, they might be dead in a way. If we are talking about public spaces, if all people will be attracted here. And I'm sorry for such a provocative question, but
no, it's not. Yeah, no, but the context is way much bigger than the closed premises. The context is, I think, the whole city of Vilnius now, because you can choose where to go, and there are so many different places, but you would probably go to the city center on the weekend to spend some time. But now you can see a tendency that people are actually deciding to go there, because there they can. There are some nice restaurants. There is a kindergarten where they can keep their kids. There is a zoo even in this area. So it has, all of the amenities that the family might want, for example, on the weekend. And also there are some retail outlet stores which are cheaper than somewhere in the city center. So it's your own. I think you can choose where to go. And this is one of the places, and because it just has high quality spaces and nice functions, it just attracts people. And in these close neighborhoods, anyhow, there are no, I mean, it didn't take any people from this block, because there were no people in the first place in there, so it's just, you know, there were no people to take from there. But in the bigger scale, it's quite funny when you see it from the bigger perspective, because around it, it's all of this, as I said, asphalt, concrete. There are even not so many bus stops which actually stopping next to this area. But because of those warehouses, it's quite cheap to rent them. So young companies like IT companies have their own office somewhere nearby, and they are coming here, you know, to eat something during the lunch or after work in the evening, because you have that. So kind of it creates this this effect of growth around it.
I'm just afraid of ground floors around all those areas that they don't have, they might not have any chance to have their shops or workshops, whatever, like some public spaces, and be more lively, because all people will go here to
No.
district.
Actually,
Those areas that they will just live in, and we have this dangerous situation already in Kharkiv.
okay. Because
How does it work here?
Because actually we're about to do a project quite close to this area, and actually it's also about an building and its public space premises next to it. It's kind of when you see that it works somewhere else, you also want to have something similar closer to you. So instead of it taking out from you, it actually gives to everybody, because you see a good example, you see how it works, you know the guys who maybe even constructed it, you know how much it costs, and then it kind of you want maybe to copy it, or not copy, but you know, have something similar, and this creates this avalanche effect. So it's not like stealing from one place, and because you have it here, you won't have it there. There are many people. Of course, you can't have beautiful landscape designs everywhere, because especially I was saying about these microraion areas, and there's this generic green everywhere. Of course, you can't have beautiful landscape everywhere. You have to designate areas where it's plazas, squares. That's why city centers work so well, because they have very high density and only a few plazas, squares where people gather, but then because they really value those public spaces have such a high quality in architecture, materials. There are so many expensive cafeterias around it, because it's just, you know, there's not so many of those public spaces around, and people appreciate it. So it's connected. I think it's always a balance of course, you have to always think about the context, about bigger picture of the area. So, but I think it's like a virus, you know, if you see something, it kind of, as I said about those other shopping malls, it kind of, now they're really investigating the site, how it works. But it's not only about, this is not about shopping malls, this is just about a place area where it's nice to be. And for us as an architects, for ourselves, we had this challenge at just how to make nice spaces to be, whether it's a kindergarten, whether it's some kind of a shop or cafeteria. It's just about so many things. It's about nice materials. As I said previously, you have to be honest in what you do and how you do it. For example, what kind of materials do you use? We try never to use this fake materials, kind of a fake plastic that imitates marble or something. If it's plastic, then maybe let's have it bright. You know, if it's marble, then again, if it's really possible to have marble, because it's super expensive, and if you would have it outside, probably because of the seasons, because of this winter and ice, it would, you know, you wouldn't like to have a marble. So you have to think also about these materials and be honest in structure somehow in architecture and everything that you do. And
do you use concrete steel in your constructions?
Concrete steel?
Concrete steel. Curtain steel. Sorry, curtain steel.
Yes.
What can you tell me about its durability? I never met it. Maybe in Kharkiv now we use it, but not very widely spread this curtain steel. Is it decorative? Is it reliable?
You could, I don't know. I'm not really a seller or producer of those materials. You have to then really write to the guys who are producing it and ask them about specifications. But this is an interesting topic. Another interesting topic about nowadays, because of the regulations, fire regulations, costs, insulation stuff, there are so many things that are being standardized. For example, what you can, what you can't use. And I think it's becoming more and more complicated to use some kind of a, odd brick on the facade, cut it differently. Because even, for example, this detail that I showed, the client has to take a risk that maybe in 5 years, because of these seasons, winter and summer, this 500 cycles of freezing and unfreezing, maybe will start to come off from the facade. But it's a risk we have to take if you want something like that, and you evaluate that, you make some calculations, and you think that maybe okay, maybe in 5 years we'll change something, maybe it's affordable, or maybe it will survive. Maybe some companies can give some insurance that it will work. So it's always a balance.
Kind of experiment.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay, then I don't know, maybe then who wants? I'm inviting maybe to have a drink somewhere, and we could just discuss personally more about differences and similarities between Ukraine and Lithuania. Because for me it's also extremely interesting what you are doing here. You have such a beautiful academy in Kharkiv. We don't in Vilnius. Huh? Without acoustics? Awful? So I have a bad hearing, so for me it's fine.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.